The weather's been a bit awful, hasn't it? I mean, yesterday I took the dog to the beach, didn't realise it was quite as windy as it was, nearly got blown into the sea. And apparently there's about 3 more storms right behind. It's going to rain every single day this week.
Well, I saw some footage of a guy in Cork who looked like he was about to be blown over. And actually, by comparison, here in London, it's not too bad.
No.
I was in Ireland over Christmas when we had one of the big storms. I can't remember what it was called. And the wind was so strong that I tried to get onto a beach. I physically couldn't. It was like being up against a wall. I was being sandblasted. It was like nothing I've ever seen before.
That's the first bit of land as well from when you come all the way across the Atlantic, isn't it? So it's that much worse.
It's like 20-foot waves. Really incredible.
Incredible stuff. Well, let's get on with it because Donald Trump seems to be the story of the morning so far. Last night they put it out, did they not? With great glee, Downing Street, because normally they don't put things out straight away. Oh, he's had a phone call. You know, Donald Trump has suddenly made a phone call to Keir Starmer, so all's well with the world. So all of these lefties who were telling me, we don't care about Donald Trump, that's why we didn't go to the inauguration, that's why we didn't want to be invited there, that's why we don't want to hang around with misogynists and racists, are all going, he's had a call, you know.
It's all of David Lammy's friendly comments.
Yes, he's had a call, you know, the president has finally got in touch.
I think they're worried they're going to get the Columbia treatment, aren't
Do you
they?
think so? Isn't that incredible, though? Tell the story, because I think people may not know. It happened sort of late yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah, so the Americans sent back a host of, I think they were criminals, weren't they? Colombian criminals. Yes. On a military plane back to Colombia. The president of Colombia refused to accept the plane, tried to turn it back, and in response, President Trump dealt with things as things ought to be dealt with, as I wish we would, by announcing a whole host of various restrictions on Colombians travelling to America, various
financial
tariffs.
aid packages.
He put a 25% tariff on all Colombian goods, and immediately what happened? The Colombians not only did a U-turn, but also offered their presidential plane to bring...
Actually, and it was all sorted out while Donald Trump was apparently on the golf course. So he was on sort of the 6th hole when he decided to first find out about the fact that this had happened. And by, I think, 2 holes later, by the 8th hole, it had all been sorted out. And, I mean, the guy just seems to not stop working. I mean, ever since he's been in, and he was crisscrossing the country yesterday, ended up in Vegas at one point, and then he was in North Carolina, and he was seeing the fire victims in California. I mean, the work ethic of this guy is quite remarkable.
He's the only world leader who seems to have not aged dramatically in office. I mean, the guy's got stamina like you can't imagine. When we see, you know, prime ministers who are obviously not operating at the same level as Donald Trump, and they look haggard within about 2 weeks, and he's just Duracell bunny. He just keeps on going, and he's showing the world how to get stuff done. That's how you do it. You have to be robust. And it's interesting that people have criticised him, saying, you know, the usual commentators that you would expect, saying, oh, well, you know, not terribly diplomatic. I think it's fantastic diplomacy.
Absolutely.
Would you say it works?
Yeah. Well, diplomacy doesn't seem to get you very far.
They seem to be defining diplomacy as things that don't work.
Yes, exactly.
Are not in your interest.
Exactly. Let's have a look at a couple of clips, because over the weekend, Rachel Reeves suddenly came out of the limelight because she's been hiding for a while. So you haven't really seen much of her for a long time. Rachel Reeves was talking to, I think, Trevor Phillips, first of all. Here she is talking about going back into the European Union through perhaps a back door.
Well, it was really interesting to see Maroš Šefčovič this week suggest that Britain might be welcome.
The EU Trade Commissioner.
Yeah, the UK might be welcome in that pan-European and Mediterranean customs framework.
I mean, she's not the greatest orator, is she? And I mean, she wasn't any better on Laura Kuenssberg either. She just doesn't seem to be able to answer a quite straight question.
Oh, it's a plague of mediocrity, and this government isn't perfect. We've had this problem for a very long time, but when you look back on Prime Minister's questions from, you know, the era of Thatcher and Tony Blair, the quality is just so high. And to be fair, I think Kemi Badenoch has single-handedly raised the quality of Prime Minister's question time. But when you look at some of the MPs and the speeches that they give, and the people that are in this, Rachel from Accounts.
Yes. Well, Rachel from Accounts is the boss of Darren Jones, who's been wheeled out the last sort of 2 weekends, and he's the sort of the vegan deputy who just looks like a gust of wind would blow him over. And I know that's not necessarily a disqualification for being a politician, but he's just so kind of insipid. He doesn't really say anything.
Well, that's the thing, actually. The whole thing is insipid. Keir Starmer's response to Southport was a perfect example of, I mean, insipid is being kind.
Yes.
The whole thing is insipid and mediocre, and Rachel Reeves not even able to sort of get her words out.
No.
Clearly.
Well, she keeps talking, and I was saying this. I made a little video just before the show, which we haven't managed to get out yet. I'll put it out soon. She keeps talking about growth as if it's something that we can all see. But we can't see it because nothing's growing. And we've got Dyson on the front page of the Times today, a very successful businessman, Sir James Dyson, who's accused the Chancellor of vindictiveness by changing inheritance tax rules, says that family businesses employing 14 million people are going to be fleeced. And she's busy telling us all about how concentrating on growth and, you know, the economy has to be stimulated, and that's what we're doing. But they're not, except they're not doing it.
Yeah, just wait until these tax changes are implemented.
Yeah, in April.
We'll just be seeing small companies folding.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are people across the country, probably people who are listening to this show, who own small businesses and are tearing their hair
in
out,
despair.
to put it lightly.
Oh, for sure.
Because particularly for, you know, small family businesses, this is existential.
Yeah.
The idea that this is going to result in growth. I'm not an economist.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I should say, unlike Rachel Reeves.
Unlike Rachel Reeves, who not only is an economist, but she studied economics at the London School of Economics. You have to get the whole
quite like Rachel Reeves. I am not an economist.
Yes.
And I can tell it. You know, it's just pure common sense that if you raise national insurance in this way and you make it more difficult to employ people, not only will those companies fold, but they won't be able to expand because they're not going to be able to employ people. And if you don't have businesses expanding, then how on earth do you have
exactly? And also, if people
region?
have less money in their pocket to spend, they will spend less money. Therefore, they will stimulate the economy less. Therefore, the economy will shrink. It's very straightforward.
And we saw the telltale signs of that before Christmas because retail was down.
Yeah, absolutely. Piece of the Telegraph on page 17. Fears of a recession are growing after business chiefs said they would be forced to ramp up job cuts as Rachel Reeves' tax rate hits growth. Bosses in the private sector say they expect a significant fall in activity over the next 3 months. And this is the Confederation of British Industry. You know, all of the kind of the business organisations, all of the small business organisations are all saying the same thing. You know, we are basically deep in the brown stuff, and we're not coming out of it anytime soon.
Yeah, and in the run-up to the election, all Labour seemed to do was talk about how they were communicating with business, talking to business, and now are they listening to business?
But what we know is that they're in cahoots with some business, aren't they? They're in cahoots, for example, with BlackRock. They're in cahoots with some of the banks because they're the ones that have instituted all these DEI policies, and they're in cahoots with the sort of people that they invited to the investment summit, who are all the same kinds of companies, you know, sort of rather big multinationals who are very interested in the sorts of things that Labour want, you know, closer ties with the European Union, you know, more diversity, more inclusion, more equity, you know, all of that. But proper businesses, actually, that grow the economy are not keen at all.
Well, I wonder whether, you know, what those companies think of things like the expansion to Heathrow or building all these new homes that don't really tie in very well with their net zero aspirations.
I know, I find that really weird. We've got another clip, actually. Here she is talking about the third runway for Heathrow to Laura Kunsberg.
A third runway will mean that instead of circling London, flights can land at Heathrow. So a lot has changed in aviation, and sustainable aviation and economic growth go hand in hand. We're an open trading economy. We need to bring investment in, but I believe that clean energy, that reducing our carbon emissions are good for economic growth. We can do the two together.
There will be a third runway then. You've more or less just said that.
Well, we'll announce our plans in due course, but already we've signed off expansion at Stansted and City Airport.
The great thing about Rachel Reeves is that she doesn't actually understand what she's talking about, right? Because she then got sort of into a real mess about biofuel, because she then said that, of course, the expanded Heathrow Airport would create cleaner air, partly because planes wouldn't be flying around London all the time, which I don't believe for a second, because the more you expand traffic, the more traffic you get. I mean, just ask Sadiq Khan what it's like when he's building the second Blackwall Tunnel, which is getting worse every day, right? But she then said, but also these planes will be using biodiverse fuel, so actually they won't be so polluting. To which Laura Kunsberg said, well, why are you shutting Grangemouth then? Because Grangemouth is the one place in Britain, up in Scotland, where they can actually produce this fuel, but you're shutting it down. Oh, well, she couldn't answer that one at all. So we're not going to make any of this fuel.
Biodiverse is a good turn of phrase, isn't it? It's very, very this government.
Very much so.
Even the fuel is diverse.
It's literally pie in the sky.
But
literally.
I mean, what you've just described is the common sense deficit again, isn't it? Poor Rachel's had a bad run.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't change her CV to say that she's a pilot so to justify her
or
expertise.
An engineer. I've studied engineering at the London School of Engineering. I am an engineer.
At the London School of Pilotry.
Yes, absolutely. Brilliant.
Yeah, like you said, the idea that because the planes won't be circling in the air, that will create less pollution, but you're expanding it so there are obviously going to be more planes, which means that the planes will still be circling in the air because there'll still be a limited area, you know, limited spots where they can land. There'll just be more planes. That's the whole idea. Otherwise, if it's not, then it's not growth, is it? It's not going to grow the economy if there are not more planes.
But also, politicians like her talk about planes as if they've never seen one. You know, they talk about airports as if they've never been at one. You know, planes won't circle around London. Well, when have you ever seen planes circling around London? But
it's interesting that, so they're also announcing this alongside building more homes, particularly near railways and so on. And it's interesting to see that people like Lisa Nandy, Miliband, who have really been on the eco bandwagon, are saying they're not going to resign over this. This is obviously not something that's not compatible with I know they're already sort of trying to push the deadline a bit on the net zero by 2030 as they realise that it's impossible.
It's actually not going to happen.
And in a sense, I'm actually quite glad that about this announcement to expand Heathrow, because I do think that this is sort of sticking the knife into the net zero nonsense. Because the reality is, you know, politically, when you have to, your policies have to actually come into contact with reality. You realise that this is not something that is possible. And having growth and net zero, as with many of Labour's other policy goals, they are pulling in every direction.
And it doesn't work.
None of it is coherent. The whole thing is completely dissonant. And in a way, when you listen to Rachel Reeves doing the media rounds, and for as many words as she can actually get in a coherent way, you get this sense that it's almost like magical language. They're going to do this and we're going to do that, and these are things that are not necessarily compatible with each other. And it's as if they can just say, oh, we're going to do this,
but they just keep saying it.
But they don't explain to you the means by which they're going to do that. So when they've announced all of this stuff that's also in the papers today about A&E patients being treated at home and having respiratory centres and all of this, and having ambulances come to people's houses in a shorter amount of time, and not having people treated in car parks and in hospital corridors. I mean, it's not all nice for them to say so, but how?
I was going to say,
where's the money going to come from?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't treat people in an A&E, how are you going to treat them at home? How are you going to get somebody to the house if you can't get somebody literally down the stairs?
And surely that
takes
takes more resources than it would to build more hospitals. To increase the capacity and to actually use the money efficiently in the NHS rather than funding all of these DEI roles, instead to be focusing on, you know, treatment sort of on the front line, nurses, doctors. How are they going to fund and resource sending people to people's houses?
Yeah, they're not.
It just seems like fantasy land.
Unbelievable. Yeah, exactly right. We've got one more clip to show you just before we take a little break, and this is back to Trevor Phillips' show on Sky. This is Rachel Reeves talking about being called Rachel from accounts.
Does it hurt you to be described as Rachel from accounts?
Well, you know, I've probably been called worse things, Trevor, but I became an MP almost 15 years ago now. Before I became a Member of Parliament, I worked as an economist at the Bank of England, and then I worked in the private sector in financial services for Halifax Bank of Scotland. I'm proud of the jobs that I did before I became a Member of Parliament, but in the end, people are going to judge me on the job that I'm doing now, the job that I'm doing as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
So you didn't really answer that one either.
She said it again, though, didn't she, that she was an economist at the Bank of England? Was she or wasn't she?
Well, I mean, nobody seems to be very sure. I mean, people say she might have been some kind of an economist, but I think just to say you're an economist at the Bank of England, I mean, it's a bit of a broad area, isn't it?
I like the sharp end of that blade that he's stuck in. Does it hurt you, Rachel?
Yes.
Does it hurt you?
Exactly right. Rachel from accounts, I'm afraid it's going to stick.